I have to tell you, it's June 2015 and it's very cool. Lots of rain and very cool. However, that doesn't stop us from being happy, eh? This is A Look in the Dark, chapter 22, which is called Network, and this is the first part of that chapter. I warn you, this is a sad part of this story. Tuesday, September the 4th, drifted from a pleasant afternoon into a very cool evening and very clear, and though there was not a frost, it certainly seemed like there should be. Danny and Carol Green were in the back garden listening for the barn owl that they'd heard the night before, but there was no sound of it at all. Carol pointed up at the stars, which were very bright and clear. Those stars produced feelings of humility and eternity, as well as awe in both gazers, and for a while they just stood in silent pleasure. At moments like this they didn't need to speak, because they could feel their oneness, and not just with each other but with the universe itself. It was as if the stars were doing all the talking needed. When they returned to the house and were enjoying a cup of hot chocolate and the late night news, Danny seemed to read Carol's thoughts. "What will be in tomorrow night's news?" he murmured. He was very conscious that the next morning was the day. Hutchins had renegotiated the timing and informed them that on September the 5th they could be confident that major events would take place. The unintentional pun, major events, was enjoyed when Danny phoned him. "It's like doing your exams, Dan. Like your A-levels." Carol was thinking back. "I didn't do A-levels." "Alright, your O-levels then." "You mean we're being tested?" "No, I mean, in your exam, you hand in your exam paper and then you wait. And the night before you get the results, you keep saying, 'What if?'" Carol sipped at a drink of chocolate. "I never thought about that. I handed in the paper and I forgot it." Carol knew that her husband had not worried too much about academic achievements. "I would say, what if I didn't really do my best? What if I answered that question in the wrong way? What if I get a lousy mark? For me it was torture waiting." "Well, exams were never torture for me. I was not a student like you, you know." "Funny that, Danny boy, when you're a writer now." "I'll tell you what though, Carol, this is torture now, and I am thinking what if. Like, what if they don't think it's important? What if there are some corrupt cops and they won't stand us? What if we've wasted our time and nothing happens?" Carol was pleased that her husband was anxious too. "Yes, and what if nothing happens? What if Stannis knows about us?" "Yeah, I know what you mean. Another worry I have is about connections. You remember when that Pakistani guard on the train coming down from Scotland gave us all those connections down the west side of England and said we would get to Bath much more quickly?" "Aye, and you spent all day worrying about the connections, and he got us there 2 hours earlier." "I know. Well, I'm worrying about all the connections now. And they go around the planet. Is it ever going to all join up?" Truth is, all 4 members of the Ace Alliance were worrying. The night before there'd been a knock at the Greens' door, and they were both edgy. It had only been a man selling life insurance, but in their imagination it might have been Stanhurst or one of his cronies. Ricky had walked out of an auction in Dorchester because he got paranoid about a man standing behind him who seemed to be watching him. Sue had been worried the same afternoon about the Land Rover parked outside her new home, only to be told by Rick later that evening that it belonged to a man who looked after the forestry side of the estate. When Danny went to bed on September the 4th, it was nearly September the 5th. "Ricky is worried, Carol. He said he's not worried about himself, but he would hate me to die young, and if it had happened to you and Sue, he would never forgive himself." "Oh well, he's okay on that one, Danny boy." "Why?" "Because if all 4 of us were dead, his worrying would be over, wouldn't it? Did I tell you what Sue said?" Danny didn't answer, so she told him again. "She said that if they were all murdered, that would be a pity, but Stannis could not kill the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, the Custom and Excise, or Scotland Yard. She admitted she's a bag of nerves, but said she would never regret being involved, whatever happened." "The day you got her involved was a good one. Brave and lovely girl, that." At 4:30 in the morning, Royston Hutchins was standing at his front door as he gave Betty a kiss that said, Thanks for getting me such an early breakfast." She held his raincoat out for him. "The forecast is bad, Royston. Put it on, please." As he put his arms into the sleeves of his raincoat, he said, "Betty, remember the 5th of September. Is it not supposed to be November, dear?" "Normally, yes, but this year it's September." He kissed his wife again, and as he drove out of their gates, she thought about her husband's little riddle, and she knew that something big was taking place. He always fed her a riddle when it was going to be one of those days. She went back to bed, but she didn't sleep. She worried that her lifelong copper husband was getting a bit too close to retirement to be involved in major operations. At 5:30, when Bennett joined him at his office, Hutchins already had 2 coffees sitting steaming on the desk. "Morning, Bennett." "Morning, sir. Are you ready to light the blue touch paper, Sergeant?" "You bring the matches, sir, and I'll light the fireworks." "Yes, we'll do it together and then watch the sparks and listen to the bangs." The Chief Inspector hadn't taken his raincoat off, and there was still rain on his face. He took off his glasses and found a handkerchief to dry them. "Just read me out loud the contents of that file, will you? Then we'll be on our way. I want to check the area out before any of the shops are open and before Stanhurst arrives." Bennett read the details of all that would take place in Clapham. Nobody else was going to act anywhere in the UK or Ireland before Hutchins had Stanhurst safely in the back of a police car. Their visit to his office was a blue touch paper, and soon every police force in Britain and most in Ireland would be making connecting arrests. Like a tsunami, the wave of events would spread out from the epicentre in the southwest of London. An hour later, after the 2 detectives had walked in the rain around the district of Stanhurst's office, the inspector treated his protégé to a good breakfast in a working man's cafe he knew a mile down the road. "We'll go to war well fed, Sergeant." The inspector cleared his plate, looked at his watch and replaced his spectacles. His young sergeant would have been even more impressed had he known the inspector was enjoying his second morning meal. Another cup of tea and we'll be on our way. As they left the hungry man's paradise, the inspector asked Bennett to stay close to him. "I want you with me when I arrest this wasted space called Stanhurst or Fuller, right?" "Yes, please, sir." "You know, my very oldly mother has a budgie, Bennett." "Sir?" "Last weekend I told him we were going to make the world a more secure place for his friends. Do you think he understood me?" "I doubt it, sir." "Right, Sergeant. Check all the others are in place, please. We have a short drive and then we'll park the car. Make sure that the surveillance team have Stanhurst in his building, and we'll walk round and pay him the visit we wanted to for weeks." Soon everything was in place. Not many marked cars were visible in Clapham on that drizzly grey morning, but the Chief Inspector knew that a backup team were watching as he and Bennett walked past the Greek cafe and entered into the door of Stanhurst's place of business. Up the stairs in his office, Stanhurst was replacing the receiver after taking an order from a customer in Lincolnshire. That was the 3rd order he'd taken from Philip Myers for a rare parrot. Pausing to congratulate himself, Stanhurst was very pleased with himself. He was making money more speedily than he had ever had as an armed robber. Even more important to him, the power he was gaining. Soon he would be getting news of some rivals being blotted out on the continent. And the couple that had been asking too many questions in Brazil had conveniently disappeared in Rio. Considering he didn't believe in any god, Stanhurst was doing a good job at behaving as if he was one. And both man and animals were suffering under his influence. On the ground floor, Barbara Kerr was also busy thinking. She was doing very well out of her relationship with the Major, and she felt sure that in a while he would leave his wife and throw her out of Normandy House. The brassy blonde was daydreaming about this when 2 gentlemen walked in, dripping from the rain. "Ah, good morning, madam. We are here to see Major Stanhurst." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he does." "Upstairs, is he?" Bennett followed the Chief Inspector up the stairs, and the criminal's mistress had just enough time to shout a warning on the internal phone. "It's the fuzz!" Before the words left her mouth, 2 uniformed officers came through the door and started to caution her. Upstairs, Stanhurst had taken a gun he had in a drawer. It was what the Irish called a BAP, a Browning automatic pistol, as used in close to 40 countries by the military. Stanhurst had always liked this gun, though in armed robberies he had used sawn-off shotguns as well. This handgun had short storage space for 13 rounds, and as he always kept one in the chamber, Stannis could fire 14 deadly rounds in an emergency from the barrel of it. Quickly he opened the window of his office, and taking in the police vehicles and officers around the gate, he'd waited a second until his office door opened, and he fired a shot at the direction of the door and one toward the gate. Then he jumped onto the top of his blue BMW, denting the roof but breaking his fall. The gate was out of the question as an escape route, but very speedily Stannis ran toward the back of Theodore Idrios's cafe. A policeman at the gate ran toward him and received a bullet in his stomach as a reward. He fell to the ground in agony as Stannis burst in through the back door of the cafe. The gangster knew what he had to do if he was going to get away, and he still had 11 rounds to do it with. As Stannis was entering the back door of the cafe and closing and bolting it, Sergeant Bennett was already leaping down the stairs of the office building, and he pushed past Barbara Kerr and the two policemen who were escorting her to a waiting car. He hoped he was guessing right about the back door being a way into the cafe. He ran along the pavement and burst in the front door as Stannis appeared from the storeroom behind the cafe. Bennett had just a second to weigh up the situation, and as he did, Stannis moved toward the two ladies, the only customers. They didn't notice a man moving their way with a gun. Bennett was not about to let the Major take them as hostages, so he launched forward, and Stannis turned the Browning automatic in his direction. Theo, who had been clearing and cleaning the table near the counter, lifted a chair with more speed than he thought possible and swung it through the air. It hit Stanhurst's arm, just as he squeezed the trigger, and the bullet that would have gone into the detective's chest went into his arm instead. Stannis turned to face the cafe owner and raised the gun again. "Greek pig!" he shouted, and fired 2 bullets at Theo. The first hit him in the head, and the second was deflected by Bennett, who attacked the criminal, knocked him down, and fought with his good hand to get the gun. As the 2 uniformed officers and Hutchins entered the cafe, it was full of the screams of the younger of the 2 ladies. There was a strange mixture of smells: fried food, coffee, burnt powder, and the burnt blood that comes with the shooting of somebody at very close range. The uniformed officers soon had Stannis disarmed and handcuffed, and it was then that Hutchins noticed that his young assistant had blood coming from his lower arm. "Are you all right, Bennett?" "Never mind me, sir, but best get an ambulance quickly for that poor guy." Bennett sat down at a table, and the older lady went to Theo lying on the floor. She'd worked as an auxiliary at Guy's Children's Hospital, and she felt round Theo's neck for a sign of pumping blood. "He's alive. Oh, please God, he's still alive, but somebody get help quickly." Rita, calm till that moment, burst into uncontrolled tears. Theo lay on the floor of his cafe, beside the cleared and cleaned table he'd overturned as he fell. The ambulance was already on its way, fighting with the London traffic, but though it ignored the red traffic lights and broke the speed limit considerably wherever possible, its arrival would not lead to the repair of the friendly Greek. With as much speed as the ambulance travelled, Theo's lifeblood flowed through his brain, and before the waiting ambulance stopped outside, poor Theo had stopped breathing. His heart had stopped beating, and somewhere in the last stages of human consciousness, he thought to himself, "We got him, Danny Green, we got him." Now Theo would be waiting for a resurrection, not clearing, cleaning, cooking. No more would the cheerful Greek joke with customers or sympathise with their problems. Hutchins sent for a uniformed policewoman to look after the 2 ladies, and as Rita left, still in a flood of tears, she touched Bennett, who was in agony, gently on the shoulder. "Thank you, young man. You're very brave, and I think you saved our lives." The young sergeant smiled at her, and he took her hand. "He definitely saved mine." "I hope he's not dead. The place will never be right without Theodorus." Rita looked at Hutchins. He felt certain nothing could be done for Theo, but he just couldn't bring himself to tell the poor shocked old soul, so he just nodded. An hour and 10 minutes later, Chief Inspector Roy Hutchins and Detective Sandra Atco were in an interview room with Rita Boyston. She sipped at the cup of tea that a uniformed policewoman brought her. The inspector nodded his head to his favourite junior rank, female detective. Sandra, who was from the Brixton area and whose culture included Bob Marley, cricket and community, looked into Rita's face. "Are you all right, love?" I'm a bit shook up, dear. She studied the warm, concerned smile on the black face and continued, Theo was a real friend, you know. We had good banter every day, and since Bert died, calling in the cafe to talk to Theo, it's been one of the things that kept me going. He was such a dear. Last year, when me and Mabel went to Spain, he insisted on giving me some cash. Terrible that he should be gunned down like that. Her eyes filled up and she stiffened. Must get a grip of myself. You want to know what happened? Well, I'll tell you. That young officer of yours, he saved our lives. I reckon there's no doubt about that. Is he all right? Still at the hospital, but they say it's not too serious, Hutchins volunteered. Good. Well, young lady, you ask me the questions you want to. I want to help you get that violent creature locked up for good. In the cells, not far away, Saddest was already locked up, and he was pacing up and down in his confined space in the same way many of the animals that he traded often had. The Major was usually fairly straight in his thinking, though not in his conduct. Try as he might, he couldn't understand why this had happened. When he found out that the uncoded copies of his records were stored as evidence at New Scotland Yard, he'd be even more dumbfounded. One thing he did know, no lawyer, no matter how good, was going to get him out of this one. At the hospital, Sergeant Bennett was explaining how a very brave man called Theodorus Idrius had saved his life and lost his own. And I can't even thank him, he said to the nurse. Many people in Frome, Somerset were watching the tea time news, but even those who worked with animals at nearby Longley Estate had less interest in the main item than the Greens did. They were mentally bound to every word. The newscaster said that one of the country's largest ever police operations had taken place. Led by Scotland Yard's Wildlife Crime Unit, the police raids had stretched north, south, east and west, and the Royal Society for Protection of Birds, Her Majesty's Custom and Exercise, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and other organisations, including a number of veterinary surgeons from the Ministry of Agriculture, were all involved. It was believed that the raids were at premises of people who'd been involved in the illegal animal trade. Indeed, he had added that similar reports were coming in from correspondents all over Europe, Africa, North and South America, Australia, Asia, in fact worldwide. Scotland Yard said it was a true example of how successful international coordinated policing could be, and a number of statistics were given about the extent of damage the illegal wildlife trade was doing to the environment. The police spokesman could not at this point confirm that the raid on an office in Clapham and the subsequent murder of a man in a cafe, as well as the injury of 3 policemen, were connected to the wildlife crime raids. At this point, Carol Green felt her life run out of her. She couldn't speak. Danny Green looked at her and wanted to say, "We don't know it's Theo," but he couldn't. He reached for the phone, but it rang as he got to it. It was Ricky Claymore. "Have you heard the news, old boy?" The concern was dripping into Danny's ear with every word. "Yes, Ricky. Someone's been murdered in the cafe. Maybe it was one of the crooks. Saddest even." "Not according to Classic FM, old boy. They didn't give a name, but he's a middle-aged man and he was unconnected to the police operation." Both men remained silent for several seconds. But the same fears were going through each man's minds. Danny at last asked about Sue. Ricky explained that she was at her new home. "She usually listens to tapes of music, but I bet she's watching the news on TV tonight. I'll go over there and see she's okay. Ring you later, Daniel." "We don't know what's happened, and it's stupid to jump to conclusions. At least it's all worked out. It's happening, I mean." "Too true it is. The results are first class, and if the courts treat this lot as seriously as the police have, there'll be a lot of these guys confined for a few years." "It would have been terrible, Rick, if one of us had been killed, but if someone uninvolved has, or..." His words tailed off. "What if someone not as involved?" "Look, Rick, phone us if you get any more news, will you?" It was a BBC Radio 4 midnight news that gave them the details they were all for dreading. The report came from a reporter who had been to Scotland Yard with other media people, and in the car park they were given a few more details by a very tired Inspector Hutchins. The Ace Alliance half in Somerset and half in Dorset, listened intently. There have been police raids all over the country today, in fact all over the world. Attention has been especially on events in Clapham, London. The police raids have all been in connection with the illicit trade in wild animals, and it has now been confirmed that the violent events in Clapham were directly connected to the other raids. It seems that a high-ranking wildlife criminal was operating from an office in Clapham, and when his premises were raided he made an escape through the back of the building, injuring 3 or 4 police officers with a handheld firearm. He then made an attempt to use the customers in a nearby cafe as cover to make good his escape. A detective tried to intervene, and a man in the cafe came to the detective's aid. The criminal fired shots and the man in the cafe was seriously injured and he died before a medical team was able to get to him. The police have not released the murdered man's name yet, but local people are sure that he was the Greek Cypriot owner of the cafe. Carol screamed as she never had done before. Danny Green was speechless. Sue became hysterical. Richard Claymore, stunned, said, "Oh God, no, please, no." Danny held Carol as she cried, as he had never seen her cry before, and he was conscious of the stream of tears running over his own cheeks. After 20 minutes of consoling his wife, he realised there was someone who was going to be taking this even harder. "Carol, love, we must find out how Sue is." Carol nodded and handed her husband the telephone. He, for his part, didn't have a clue what he was going to say. Ricky answered the phone at Sue's home. The anger blazed in Ricky's voice. "How dare that evil dog gun down such a beautiful human being? I feel like it's all my fault." "Now come on, Ricky. It certainly isn't your fault. How's Sue?" Ricky sighed as if all the air was being compressed out of him. "Inconsolable," he said in a low whisper. "Are there 2 phones in that house, Ricky?" "Yes." "Put Sue on one of them, please. I'm going to give Carol this one and I'm going to use the one in the hall. We need a 4-way communication here." Danny felt as if the need in the situation was in control more than any conscious thought on his part. Soon all 4 were at the phone, and though that was a lot of interference using the 4 phones, at least they could all hear each other, or more especially the other 3 could hear Danny. He knew he had to be the one to take control. "Listen, everybody, we don't know the circumstances for sure yet, but it really does seem that a very good man has died. But please listen. When we each got involved in this, we knew the risks. One or more of us might have died, and if word ever got out, we could yet, all 4 of us, maybe. So do we regret being involved? I know your answers to that. And you, Sue, have been very emphatic and brave about that. Well, let me tell you this. From the word go, Theo was involved. Even before you, Sue. You know that, and he was our only reliable source of independent information. He took photos, in England anyway. He took photos that will undoubtedly be used in court along with all the other evidence. Theo Andreas has been a true friend to you, Sue, and you to him, and we all know what this friendship meant, and the kind of man that he was. How can we best pay the tribute that this man's worth? By making sure that his contribution is known and that people know that this kindly Greek was an asset to their community. We will grieve for our friend, and we will never forget him, but we got Theo involved, Ricky. Or better put, he got himself involved. He wanted to see Stanos locked up, and he helped us achieve that. None of us must blame ourselves. No, and nor would Theo. Our lives have been enriched by his, but ours have to go on." Sue was trying to speak through her tears, but had difficulty expressing how she felt. "I have such a terrible pain inside," she managed. "Not physical. Pain. Something awful. Breaking my heart." Carol knew that pain. Lots of people in Northern Ireland did. She knew what Danny was doing. "Listen, Sue," she began. "You're a brave, brave girl. But your heart's breaking because his lovely man was like a kindly uncle to you, right? You're very young and that pain is so bad. I have it too, but you were very close to Theo. Cry, Sue. Tonight cry and cry. One thing I've learned in Northern Ireland, though, is grieve, yes, but go forward. In the days ahead, think about the fun times with Theo, how he made you laugh. Remember him singing Greek songs in the cafe? Turn your sorrow to joy. This was the man who spread kindness but hated evil. This was the man that brought us together. I don't know where Theo is, but I'm sure there's justice in the end and he's safe. Rejoice in what he did while he was with us. It's like that in the north of Ireland. When someone gets shot, it's dreadful, but life has to go on. They talked for half an hour and Sue just said yes and no. Ricky said he felt the tragedy was that Theo was like a bottle of the finest wine and that he'd been knocked to the floor, the bottle smashed and the wine only half consumed. The wine of his friendship that he'd hoped to cultivate could be enjoyed no more. Ricky stayed with Sue that night, and as he tossed around restlessly he could hear the poor girl's tears of anguish from the next room. Yet the sensitive young lady's sour sadness would ever be in the background of her life, like bitter herbs that would season her understanding of others in sorrow in a way that only comes from personal experience. So friends, perhaps the saddest part of this story, in fact I'm sure it is. But it happens, doesn't it? In this world we live in, people get shot in wars and in crimes, and there's great sadness as a result. How good it would be when that's not true anymore. Thank you for listening. This is the longest episode so far, and it's only half of this chapter. The next one will follow soon. Lots of love and lots of peace to you, my friends. Bye bye now. Bye bye.